Welcome to Caregivers Haven podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping families who are caregivers of a loved one with a mental illness gain peace of mind. Even though this is a podcast focused on family caregivers of the mentally ill, much of the discussion can be helpful to any caregiver. Your host is Sandra, your caregiver nurse consultant who, as a family caregiver, shares her passion for helping others and her lived experiences as a caregiver to provide education, support, and resources to other families. Sandra is a registered nurse and many of her guests are healthcare professionals. However, this is not a professional podcast, nor will be associated with any mental health counseling or medical doctor. Please seek help with a professional provider if needed.
Good afternoon. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Caregivers Haven. I am your host, Sandra, your mental health family advocate, empowering families who are caregivers of a loved one with a mental illness gain and maintain peace of mind. And even though this is a podcast focused on caregiving of a loved one with a mental illness, much of the discussion can be helpful to any caregiver. Before I get started, I have a couple of housekeeping items to go over. First of all, you will hear on some of the episodes that I'm a registered nurse. However, this podcast is not a professional podcast. I am not representing the profession of nursing. This is a podcast for caregivers, and I am a caregiver to loved ones with a mental illness, so I am sharing my lived experiences as a caregiver. Secondly, if anyone would like to send me a message or if you have a question, if you listen to the podcast in the Anchor app, that's Anchor. When you listen to it in the Anchor app, there will be a button with a plus sign on it that says voice message. And if you just click on that, you can record a message and leave me a message there. If it's okay for me to play your message in the podcast and to use your name, let me know. Or if you would like for it to be private, just let me know in the message that this is a private message. Okay, so before we begin our topic of the day, I'd like to share a message with you from one of our listeners. She was actually responding to the question I asked in episode 1. Remember, we talked about what do you do to meditate? What do you do to relax? What do you do for self-care? So she responded to that question, and I'd like to play it for you now. And then I will be right back after we hear it.
Thank you for your podcast, Sandra. I want you to know I'm sitting on my front porch with a cup of coffee before I have to go to work listening to your podcast. So appreciated. So this is my self-care for today. Thank you very much.
Oh, Jackie, thank you so much for listening and thank you for sending that message. And what I love about your self-care for today is it's so simple. Anyone can do it. And it just reminds me, a couple of weeks ago, I was at my mom's house and she has a bench on her front porch and all the grandkids were over and she invited me to come sit on the bench with her and watch them play. And it was a beautiful day out and we just sat there on the bench. And it was just really relaxing. So thank you. I appreciate you calling in and responding. And thank you for listening. So for those of you who've been listening to my podcast, you may have noticed that I've missed 2 weeks of the podcast. And so I was going to do the topic that I was going to do 2 weeks ago today, but I decided that I would just share with you what's been going on over the last 2 weeks, which has been a big lesson for me regarding self-care. So, as you know, I'm a registered nurse. I've been a nurse for many, many years, and I've had 4 children. So, all of that equals a bad back. I don't know any of my nurse friends who don't have back pain at some point, and I have quite a bit of back pain. I get thoracic and lumbar spine spasms, and I also get really bad piriformis syndrome, which a lot of people call sciatica. So, it's really bad, and my back, I have been feeling it coming for several months now, and then in January, I was getting really, really stiff, and I could tell my back was starting to spasm, so I tried stretching, I tried taking my 800 ibuprofen, and I was trying to get it better because my grandkids were coming at the end of February, and I wanted to be able to enjoy them while they were here, so I was trying, everything to get my back straightened out. I got it a little bit better, and while they were here, I played kickball with them in my backyard. We played soccer in my mom's backyard. I picked them up, I carried them. So, of course, my back got worse. But I kept working, I kept pushing myself. I didn't take time off to rest. And so finally one day it was really, really bad, but I had to go to a funeral that day. So I drove in my car for an hour and a half with an ice pack on my back all the way there just to help me be able to walk and to help with the pain. The next morning after that, I had my yoga teacher training class. It's an 8-hour class. We don't do asana practice the whole 8 hours. There's a lot of lecture time, but I just thought, I would go to yoga and hopefully it would help stretch my back out. That was one of the reasons I went. The second reason is because if I sign up for a class or a conference, I hate missing any parts of it. I'm really anal about that. Like, I want to go and get all the information. And so I didn't want to miss. So I got up that morning, I stretched, I made it to class. But at one point, I was in so much pain, my back spasmed, and I had to just lay flat on my back on my yoga mat and just wait until the spasms went away. And by the end of the class, I could barely walk. But I thought I could just push through it like I always do. So I didn't learn my lesson. And the next morning, I got up and tried it again. Remember, I don't want to miss a class. So I guess my body was like, okay, she's been hard-headed and she's not listening, because let me tell you, that morning as I was getting dressed, my back spasmed so bad that I dropped everything that I had in my hands. I had like a mirror and a brush. I was combing my hair. I dropped everything and had to grab onto the sink because I was falling to the floor. So I ended up in urgent care that day. I did not make it to my yoga class. I had to go to urgent care. They gave me, muscle relaxants. They gave me a shot, all these things, and took me off work for 2 days. And on that Wednesday, I went back to work, but I was in pain all day, and I almost fell again. A coworker actually grabbed me and had to carry me to a chair. It's just been bad. And so I just thought, okay, well, the next day, luckily I was already off work the next day because my family was going to Vegas. We were going on a road trip to Vegas. And I was like, I'm not going. I can't go, because just the thought of sitting in a car just sounded painful, and I just didn't think I would make it. And so I was going to stay home. But then I thought, if I'm here alone and I fall, like, no one's going to be here to help me. So I went ahead and I just took some pain meds and went. And it turned out to be the best thing for me, because while I was in Vegas and we were in our room, I had no excuse but to rest. If I had been here at home, I would have been thinking about, I need to do the dishes, or the laundry's piling up, or I need to go dust, or what about those 10 phone calls I need to make? I wouldn't have rested. I would have been limping around the house trying to do things, or I would have just been thinking about all those things and not relaxing. So it was good that I went. We were going to Vegas because our niece was playing in the Pac-12 basketball tournament. And so I went to the game that first night, and I walked really slow because it was in a casino. So it was a long walk from the car to her game, but I made it. And the next day, everyone went to like the malls or the casinos or whatever, but I just stayed in the room, flat on my back on the floor, alternating like from the heating pad to ice, sleeping. And I think I did the treatments probably twice, and the rest of the time I was just asleep the whole day. And I didn't wake up until about 6 that evening. And I never would have done that at home. So I woke up, showered, got dressed, and we went to the second game that night. And I just, hobbled on in there. And then the next day I did the same thing. I just slept and took care of my back the whole day. And when you're laying like flat on your back with nothing else to do, you think a lot. And so as I was laying there, I thought about 2 quotes that I have hanging on my bathroom mirror. And one of the quotes is by a lady named Eleanor Brown. She spells her name Brownn. And it says, rest and self-care are so important. When you take time to replenish your spirit, it allows you to serve others from the overflow. You cannot serve from an empty vessel. And the second quote is by Audre Lorde. And it says, self-care is not about self-indulgence. It's about self-preservation. And so I had a lot of time to really contemplate on those two quotes and just really think truly about what they're saying. So I go to a family support group once a month, and they have different quotes or sayings each month that they pass out. And these two resonated with me, so I brought them home and posted them on my bathroom mirror. And I've had them up there for several months, sometime last year, at the end of last year. And I know that I need to do better with self-care, which is probably why they resonated with me, why I chose them. But as I lay there, I kept thinking about like how she says you can't serve from an empty vessel. And I kept thinking, why is it that I have time to take everyone else to their doctor appointments, but I find myself rescheduling mine? Why is it that when I'm supposed to go to physical therapy for my back, I can't find the time to go? And why do I take sick days off for my family members to take care of them, but I don't take off when I need to? Like, I needed to take some time off for my back, and I didn't. So as I laid on my back, and I just realized it didn't matter, or it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many self-help books I read. It doesn't matter how many podcasts I listen to or how many quotes I tape on my bathroom mirror. It doesn't matter that I go to support group once a month and other meetings that they have. Nothing is going to change until I take action. I mean, that really hit hard. Nothing is going to change until I implement what I'm learning into my life. And I think sometimes, my daughter and I would talk about how we think we drink a lot of water because we carry a water bottle around with us all day. And sometimes if you really pay attention to it, you're not drinking a lot of water. You're just carrying this water bottle around with you all day. And because you have water and it's with you, you're thinking you're drinking a lot, but you're not. And I think it's the same thing with this. I think because I'm surrounded by positive people, I'm surrounded by positive quotes, and I read a lot of books, and I go to conferences, maybe I think I'm practicing self-care, but when it boils down to it, I'm not. I haven't put forth the action needed to really implement it into my life. So, my mother told me that I wanted to be a nurse since I was a little girl. And to this day, I've been a nurse a long time, but to this day, I still love it. I love taking care of people. I mean, it's embedded in my character. It brings me so much joy. But laying on my back has shown me that I really have to begin to put myself first. Like on the airplane, they tell you to put the oxygen mask on yourself first. Because I'm no good to anyone being in pain. I'm no good to anyone laying flat on my back with a heating pad. I couldn't provide care for anyone, including myself. If I want to continue to be a caregiver, I need to pay attention to myself. So if you recall in one of the earlier episodes, I said that this podcast was just as much for me as it is for you, the listeners. Well, this was a huge lesson learned for me, and I hope that it has helped someone else as well. It's as much for me as it is for you. So I'm going to use this podcast, to remember to practice self-care. I'm going to use this podcast as to remind me of the lesson learned. I'm going to use this podcast to hold me accountable, to practice self-care, to do self-care for me, to take care of me. Over the weekend while we were in Vegas, my husband got sick and I couldn't even help him. He needed help. He got really sick, and I could not be a caregiver for him, to myself, to anybody. It was a huge eye opener for me. So, self-care is different for everyone. I have one friend who won't miss a nail appointment, and she says that is her self-care. That is her loving herself. I know someone else who loves to bake, and she says that's her self-care. So it's different for everyone, and I'm sure it changes for everyone. But whatever it is, just don't put it off for tomorrow. I've read that self-care should be well-rounded. So it should be mind, body, soul, mind, body, spirit, mental, physical, spiritual, emotional. It has to be, well-rounded. And that's what life is about. It's about balance, because we can do too much or too little of anything, and it will get us out of balance. And, for me, I've just spent my whole life taking care of other people and kind of not taking care of myself. And it's starting to show. My body is starting to let me know. So anyway, that's why I missed the last 2 weeks. I was dealing with my back pain, back spasms, and weak legs. And I'm still not 100%, but I am improving. And this was just a huge lesson learned for me. And, I pray that I will continue to focus on myself and focus on Eleanor Brown's quote, that we can't serve from an empty vessel. And I just truly can't serve from an empty vessel. And I hope that it will help someone else out there who may need to hear this. So I'll end now, but I just wanted to share with you, what's been going on. And remember, if we want to continue to help our loved ones and be caregivers for them, we have to start with ourselves. So until next time, Caregivers Haven is wishing you peace of mind.
You can find Sandra on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Caregivers Haven. If you enjoyed listening to Caregivers Haven podcast, please share, subscribe, follow, and favorite.